Hello and welcome to my desk. This is the Shadowdark RPG. In this game master's perspective, I will tell you what this game is, who I think would like this game, give you a brief overview of the rules, share my highlights, what I like, what I didn't like, and finally I will give you some recommendations to what other books I think would work well with this. If you like videos like this, consider liking and subscribing to my channel. There's more where this came from. Now let's get started. What is Shadowdark? It is a rules-light D20 based old school role-playing game about exploration of dungeons and wilderness. Similar to basic D&D, but from its rule set, it actually comes from 5e and strips it down to the bare dungeon crawling minimum, so it feels like basic, but uses the universal D20 rollover dice mechanic, knows advantage and disadvantage, as well as inspiration in the form of luck tokens. So I think this will be a great game for people who want to try out the old school wilderness exploration, dungeon exploration play style, but are either new players that want a game that is very easy to pick up and learn, or they come from 5e. In that case, these rules will feel very familiar. This is not for people who already play old school games like basic D&D or advanced Dungeons and Dragons, or any of those derivates like old school essentials or even something like DCC. But for new players and players who come from 5e, this might just be the best game to get into the old school playstyle, because the rules are so straightforward and easy to learn, and the rest of the book gives you all of the support material and GM tools and advice you need to make this sort of game work. Before I get into the rules, let me briefly show you the book. So we get a nice hardcover, stitch-bound book ribbon. It's completely black and white, but there's some really impressive black and white artwork in here that perfectly sets the mood for the game. And I just love these black and white style of illustrations. Now, what I found curious here is the font size. I have no idea why the font is this large. Sure, it's easy to read, but it also means there's a lot less text per page. And this is already a small book here. This is Xener size for comparison. So Xener size and standard 5e books are not only larger in format, they also have much smaller text, as you can see. This text is even bigger than text from old school essentials. This text is already a bit bigger than this text, and this text is bigger still. Sure, this is very easy to read, but I don't know who needs this thick reading glasses to prefer this super large font and have a super thick book because of it. I find this size of font is easy enough to read. Anyway, just an observation. We have a pretty thick book, and there are these markers for the different chapters, so they are pretty easy to find fast. And even though the book is pretty thick, the actual rules are just these few pages. The rest is like character creation, spells, GM tools of random tables, monsters, and so on. Yeah. Let me use the character sheet to give you a brief overview of the rules. There's a D20 system that should be familiar to anyone who has played any version of D&D before. So you got a standard 6 attributes: strength, dexterity, con, intelligence, wisdom, charisma, with attribute modifiers that are added to your D20 rolls. There's not a roll under system, there's a roll over system. Hit points, ascending armor class. Weapons get an attack bonus from either your strength or your dex, but no damage bonus. Your characters will have a number of talents or spells from their class or randomly rolled from the class advancement tables. And then we have a gear and encumbrance system using gear slots. Depending on your character's strength score, you can carry more or less items. Managing your gear and the treasure you'll find is an important part of proper old school dungeon delving. Rations take gear slots, torches take gear slots, and torches and light running out is a major point in the Shadowdark rules and a major source of danger and concern for your characters. But let's get into the PDF to clearly show you some of my highlights. Character creation is breeze, and it comes with rules to generate level 0 characters, so you can play a funnel where everyone plays 4 characters, and during the first adventure most of them die, until only the most survivable and lucky are left. Which I think is a very fun way of character generation. But of course we have rules for level 1 characters as well. You roll your stats. Standard rules is 3d6 down the line. Optionally, if none of your stats are 14 or higher, you may roll a new set of 6 numbers, or use any other variant of rolling for stats or distributing points that you like. In the end, only the modifiers are important anyhow, so you might just roll a 1d4 minus another d4. Then you choose your ancestry. That mainly gives you your starting languages and 1 extra ability, like Stout for Dwarf. Start with +2 HP, roll hit points per level with advantage. Or Goblin, Keen Senses, you can't be surprised. And I like that goblins and half-orcs are included in the playable ancestries. Take note here, none of the ancestries have dark vision. Darkness and the lack of light, keeping count of your torches, keeping time of how long your torches burn is a major part of the Shadowdark experience. So, no dark vision for the players. Then you choose the class. The core rules come with 4 classes: Fighter, Priest, Thief and Wizard, and all what they can do fits on 1 or 2 pages. This gives you the weapons you can use, armor you can use, your hit points and some special abilities. And at level 1 and every uneven level you also get to roll on the talent list to get something nice and extra, but there's no like planning out a build or anything. This is very easy to make a character and jump right into the game. You should be able to do it for an entire group on a convention within half an hour and start dungeon crawling. One of the rule variants I like more than standard D&D is the spell casting. To cast a spell, you roll with a d20 plus your spell casting modifier, either wisdom or intelligence, against 10 plus the spell's tier. So 11 for level 1 spell. If you succeed on your spellcasting check, the spell takes effect. If you fail your spellcasting check, the spell does not take effect. You can't cast the spell again until you complete a rest. So for 1, there's skill check to hit anything, to do anything with your magic, just like there's a skill check for hitting anything with your sword. And you can keep casting the spells over and over again as long as you don't fail. There are no spell slots as such, which makes spellcasters way easier and, in my opinion, more fun to play than having to manage a very limited number of spell slots. However, this game knows no cantrips. If you fail your spellcasting checks, your selection of spells will grow fewer and fewer, and eventually you will lose the ability to cast any spells until you complete a rest, meaning an 8-hour rest. There's only a long rest, there's no short rest in Shadowdark. Also, if you crit fail with your wizard spells, there's a wizard mishap table for the different spell tiers you can roll on to get some chaotic magical effect, for some extra chaotic fun with spellcasting. This is similar to something like Dungeon Crawl Classic, but it's not quite as punishing. Usually a critical fail should not make your character unplayable or kill them outright, but you will have to deal with some kind of consequences. Speaking of spells, we have a good selection of all the common spells you might expect in dungeon crawling D&D, and they all have a very basic description. So the spells don't take up a huge amount of pages within the book. But there's nothing like the randomization madness that you get with something like Dungeon Crawl Classic spells. One thing Shadowdark puts a focus on is timekeeping. How long does it take to search a room, to take a turn, to do combat, to crawl through the dungeon? If you are in the darkness, if you are in the Shadowdark, keep track of time, because your light sources, your spells, your lamps, your torches only last 1 hour, and you keep a timer of that. That will run in real time as you are playing and discussing and joking around, telling stories or whatever. The time passes, your torches and your resources run out. And if you do something that takes a longer time in-game, like searching through an entire room, for example, then you advance your timer by that amount of time. This makes resource management and especially light management a big part of the game. And if you run out of light, if you are in total darkness, there is no dark vision, you take any action with disadvantage, and the environment is considered deadly. That means that every crawling turn, the GM rolls for random encounter. Recovering HP is fairly straightforward. There are healing spells, potions, and of course resting. There's only long rest, 8 hours, but at least you are fully rested, full HP, all spells restored after completing this rest. Combat should be very familiar, initiative, rounds, actions. Take note of the death rules. A character that goes to 0 HP falls unconscious and is dying. They get a death timer, 1d4 plus con modifier, minimum of 1. If that timer runs out before they are stabilized, the characters die. So they need to be stabilized by their group with either a healing potion, a healing spell, or a first aid check against 15, which is pretty hard. There's a very small chance if you roll a 20 on a d20 on your turn, you rise with 1 HP, but that's pretty unlikely. So compared to 5e, this is a pretty deadly game. There's far less healing available. There's no healing word you can do in a bonus action. You have to get to the dying character and use your action to either give them a potion, first aid, or a healing spell. And your saving throws to stabilize on your own are much harder. But compared to something like basic D&D, these are generous dying rules. In basic D&D, you just die when the character falls onto 0 hit points. No death timer, no saving throws, nothing. So I'd say this strikes a nice balance between being a deadly game and being frustrating. We get additional rules for overland travel, hex exploration, downtime activities between adventures. Notice that you can go cruising, spending some of your treasure to gain XP and maybe something else. And we've got a pretty good and very beefy Game Master section. It describes on several pages, but still pretty short and concise, your role as a Game Master. That you are the arbiter of the rules. That there is a pact. You and your player come to have a game to have fun. The unspoken pact. The elements you have to keep in mind. Adventure hooks, your audience, drama, timekeeping, darkness as a constant danger, that gear is precious and can be used up, that there is an action economy, that you should give the players the information they need. Dispense information freely. If the characters test a floor where there's a trap, they find it. No roll required. This is very important GM advice in my mind. On balance, be unpredictable. The encounters are not balanced for the party. Sometimes you can fight, sometimes you shouldn't fight, and sometimes you should really run away. But be fair about it. Telegraph danger. This one's also very important in my mind. Choices matter. A choice between two identical options, which door do you open, the one to the left or the one to the right, is not actually a choice, because you don't have any information to make that choice. Players need a way to gather information about their options and make an informed decision. That creates interesting choices. This is very good GMing advice. On running the game, adventures, campaigns, NPCs, character skill versus player skill, rules and rulings. I've made an entire video about this. You are not the enemy, you are a neutral arbiter. Characters can die. Set the tone. The world, session 0, let there be darkness, attack the light. And different rules variants you might want to play out, like Blitz mode, where the light timer is only 30 minutes, forcing you to play much faster. Fatality mode, where characters die at 0 hit points. Or the Bolt mode, where you get much more luck tokens, making you succeed more often and rewarding heroic and pulpy fun action. How to use random encounter, the purpose, how often, where is it, how far is it, what is the thing the monster doing, and reaction check tables. Is the random encounter hostile or maybe friendly? Some very solid advice on traps. A tell. Most traps should have a hint or a tell, because it's very frustrating to run into a trap you had no way of knowing was there, and losing your character to just one failed dice roll. So give the traps a tell, warn the players of danger, and be careful not to make traps too frequent, or it will become a chore getting past all those traps and the game will suffer. Finding. Characters who search a specific area or object for a trap automatically find it, because it's very frustrating to run into a trap just because of a bad die roll. Disabling a trap. Thieves and characters who are trained in tinkering can describe how they disable or circumvent a trap. If the character has enough time and uses a reasonable method, the character succeeds. Reward player creativity. Don't require a roll to disable a trap. Again, very solid GM advice right here. I made an entire video just on this. Awarding XP. Basically, Shadowdark uses treasure for XP, but rather than keeping track of every piece of gold that the characters find, you have more like rough categories of the treasure. Poor, mundane, low value, ordinary, 0 XP. Normal, good value, worth protecting, useful, 1 XP. I mean, keeping track of an exact gold value for the treasure is not that hard, but this just makes it a bit easier. And then the GM section ends with a lot of random tables. Something happens. Rumors. adventure hooks, an adventure generator, NPC tables, tables for rival adventuring parties, rules and generators to make your own maps. This is a method where you take a number of die and just throw them onto your page and see where they landed and what number they're showing, and then that gives you the rooms for your dungeon. We've got random tables to fill these rooms. We've got rooms for overland hex explorations, where you generate the hex map as you go and explore it. A procedurally generated world. Rules to make a settlement map, similar to the dungeon rules. Throw a number of d6 on your sheet of paper. Random tables for taverns, because taverns are important for adventurers. Random shops. Random encounters for the Arctic, for the artisan district, castle, cave, deep tunnels, and so on, and so on. Very huge amount of random encounters. Huge amount. Then we get the chapter for monsters. We have monster generators, which is always good in my mind. Advice on how to design monsters, also useful. Finally, a good selection of your standard monsters. Aboleth, demons, devils, dinosaurs, of course dragons, giants, goblins, and so forth and so on. Pretty solid selection right here. Many tables for random treasures, depending on how good the treasure is. Rules and tables to generate magic items, potions, scrolls and wands, and so on. And then some pages with example magic items. And that brings us to the end of the book, where we find links to the Shadowdark RPG community. I found that the Facebook group for Shadowdark and the Discord server are very active. And since the game has an open license, you can find here and here that lets anyone produce stuff for this game. You can already find a huge selection of third-party material, adventures, classes, optional rules, and so forth on itch.io and drivethroughrpg. And here on Drivethrough, they are just 6 pages, 260 items, and the game is not even officially out yet. Very active and creative community. Love to see it. One of my personal highlight from the open license third-party stuff is Shadow Sun, a campaign setting that gives you all of the setting background, ancestries, classes, and rules for psionics to play a game of Dark Sun with the Shadowdark rules, or just use this heavily Dark Sun inspired Shadow Sun setting on its own. Good stuff. Dark Sun is one of my favorite D&D settings. What is also already out are the Cursed Scroll Signs from the Arcane Library themselves. This booklet gives you more spells, character classes, monsters, and adventures. The first 3 are already out. Diablerie, which is about dark magic, warlords and witches. Red Sands, which is about desert sorcerers, gladiators and assassins for your like Thousands and One Night inspired adventures. And Midnight Sun for all of you Viking fans out there. But I think the content of these scenes is very good. I especially like the first one, Diablerie, with the Warlock class, the Witch class, the Cursed Knight of St. Idris class, and all of the nice dark spells that are in here. I find that some of the content in here should really be in the core rules, like mounts and mounted combat. If you want to be serious about adventuring and overland travel, you will need pack animals and mounts for riding. Or this one page on boats, which your characters also might want to get if you're doing a lot of traveling and exploration along rivers and oceans. This I would have liked to see in the core rules. And what is still missing from the rules, even if these 3 supplements, are rules for hirelings, which not every group actually use it, but I think hirelings are a big part of the old school play style. You need hired help to make out for the higher lethality of the game, some cannon fodder, someone to carry your stuff for you. So yeah, Shadowdark. Pretty good game for new players and players who come from 5e to check out the old school dungeon crawling, hex crawling style of play. The rules are very light, very easy to learn, but still compatible with other D&D variants. It's, for example, super easy to convert adventures from old school essentials to Shadowdark. I ran Winter's Daughter on a convention and did 0 conversion work. Old School Essential has a similar amount of hit points and they give you the Ascending Armor class as an option, so no conversion work needed. That means you can use the Shadowdark rules for pretty much all old school and even new school D&D materials, campaigns, adventures, and that just gives you this huge selection of material to choose from. Both old classics and new stuff that's coming out right now and will come out in the future. And that's just one of the beautiful things about the OSR, that all of these games, Old School Essentials, Shadowdark, Beyond the Wall, Worlds Without Number, are all so similar in the rules that you can use material across all of these games. Anyhow, that's all I have for today. I wish thee safe travels, dreamers, until we shall meet again.